Hello everyone and welcome to this video. This is the second part of the series of videos about authentication, authorization, and Asp.NET Identity. In the previous video, we talked about authentication and more specifically cookie-based authentication. In this video, we will talk about Asp.NET Identity, which is a membership system which allows us to store our users and passwords, roles, claims, and etc. It helps us to log in and store the value that we want for authentication and authorization in database. Let's go to the Visual Studio. As you can see here, I still have my application UI project. Everything that I am going to write today will be placed in application.services. In the next videos, I'm going to implement login, logout, and authentication using JWT. And we have some shared functionality between both of these projects or all of these projects. And I don't want to rewrite everything. Because of that, I am going to place everything inside application.services and just reference this project in my application.UI project and use the functionality that I created there. Let's start with the code. In the app setting.json file, I just specified a connection string. This is a connection string to a server, to a local server that I have, which is localDB. The database name should be identity demo. We need to specify a connection string inside the UI application for having access to the identity database. And then we will store there and read the data related to users, permissions, and claims. What else do we need to check? Let's go to the launch setting.json and the application URL, because we are going to have more than one application and we are going to run them all side by side. Let's have this URL localhost with port 5292. For now, it is all that we need. Here inside my program.cs file, I need to add a lot of things. There are so many services that I need to register here, and I need to add this middleware as well. It is something that I don't like. Usually in my project, I create a folder inside the project and call it infrastructure. If I want to add a middleware, I will add a middleware class. If I want to register a server, I will add a service registration.cs file there and just use some extension method that I defined there. Let me go to the service files. As you can see, I have one infrastructure folder here. In the infrastructure folder, I have some functionalities. The first thing that I need to change is about the registering the services about cookie authentication. As you can see here, I created one extension method and I just called it add application cookie authentication, and I placed it in infrastructure services, infrastructure service registration. Let's see it together. Let me close everything and cookie authentication. It is exactly the same code that I had. It is an extension method. For writing an extension method, your class should be static, the method should be static, and the first parameter should be the object, should be the type that you want to have the extension method on top of its definition. And here, because I'm going to use service collection, iService collection, I am calling this iService collection and call it services. Then I can use these services, add authentication as I explained in the previous video, and tell it to add cookie configuration. I have some configuration here, and because it is a kind of fluent API, I'm returning the service here. If I go back here, you will see that it is exactly the same. I used builder, but in the extension method, because it was based on iService collection, I'm using just service collection. Here, builder.services, and then I will see this extension method. Let me remove this one. The program should work as it worked. We changed nothing. We just cleaned our code. What I did till now is just cleaning my code. But what should I do if I want to add identity and identity database to my project? Let's start with adding the dependencies here. I added the dependencies to the application.services. You will see the dependencies that I installed. Microsoft ASP.NET Core Identity Entity Framework Core. It is what I need to install This DLL allows me to create a DbContext, one specific implementation of DbContext for identity database. And what I need to have is ASP.NET Core Identity.UI, and you need to install Microsoft Entity Framework SQL Server as well, because we are going to place this database in a SQL Server database. Let me close everything. For using SQL Server, the first thing that we need is having one connection string. It is what we have. Fine. And then we need to have a DbContext. DbContext is placed inside the application services and inside a folder data contexts. I called it user identity context. It is like normal entity framework DbContexts, but there is a small difference here. We inherited from DbContext for normal entity framework DbContexts, but here you need to inherit from identity DbContext. The difference here is that normal DbContext doesn't have any entity defined inside that, but the identity DbContext, without defining any entity here, it will have some tables about user, roles, the relationship between the roles and users, claims for users, claim for roles. You will see that in a second. What we need is just injecting the services like what we do for normal entity framework project. Usually inside the program.cs, we just use builder.services at DbContext and things like that. And after that, we use SQL and pass the connection string to it. I'm not going to use it here. Then I created another service registration method, which is an extension method, and I called it add application services. And I'm passing my connection string. I can get the connection string using builder configuration get connection string and the name of the connection string that I have, which is default connection. Let's go to the code and see it. Here we just used the services and used at DbContext. We told it that the type of DbContext that we have is user identity context, and we passed an option to it. We need this option to tell it that we are going to use SQL Server database engine behind the scene using use SQL and pass a connection string to this one. And we registered another service as well, which is not important for now. I will come back to this one soon. And the next thing that we usually do when we have our services registered is to create a migration file and migrate everything to the database. It is not what I really like to do in this session and in this video. I'm going to create a seed method, and inside the seed method, ensure that if the database exists or not. If it doesn't exist, I'm going to create a database and seed the data there. The implementation is like that. Let me close this one. We have a seed data. Now I want to create an extension method on top of application, web application. And here, as you can see, let me close everything here. And let me comment these lines of code. I don't need them for now. Fine. I'm just creating a scope, and inside this scope, I am using application, which is web application.services create a scope. I'm creating a scope, and then I'm asking this scope to ask the dependency injection system that it has registered to create an instance of user identity context for me. User identity context is my context. I showed you that it has nothing in it. When we have the context, first I try to delete the existing database using context that database that ensure delete async, because during the implementation I'm going to change so many things, and every time that I am running the application I want my database to get deleted and create a fresh new one. And after that I will use await context database ensure created async. This method is going to create a database for me. It returns false if the database exists, and returns true if the database doesn't exist and it created the database. So for the seeding the data, I put this method inside an if, which means if the database didn't exist, it is going to seed the data. Usually in the code that I have, I will remove this line after my test is completed. By test, I mean development. My development is completed and I'm not going to add anything else to the database, and then this line will be meaningful. Otherwise, every time you are deleting your database and you try to create the database, and this will be true all the times. Let me save the code. Here, if I go to the databases, let me delete my identity database. Let's check it. I don't have it. It is deleted. Now that I'm sure that I don't have the database inside my SQL Server database, we checked it inside the SSMS. Let's go back to the program.cs. Inside the program.cs, I can see that it is registered, and I need to uncomment this one. Now that I have this application that seed data in place, let's open one console or PowerShell and run .NET Watch. By running that, you will see that it tries to run everything, and when the application gets started, I don't want this one, yeah, you will see that it is creating so many things inside my database. Let's go back to the database. Inside the database, refresh it. I have the identity demo right now. Inside the tables, I have ASP.NET users, ASP.NET roles, ASP.NET user roles, ASP.NET role claims, and ASP.NET user claims. These are the tables that I'm going to work with today to tell you how to store my users, my roles, the claims related to the roles and users, and the relationship between the roles and users. Fine, let's go back to the code. Here I can see that I have some default values and default fields and default tables about users and roles. Let's go back to the SQL Server again and open the ASP.NET users and see the columns. I have username, normalized username, email, and so on, but I don't have address. Usually we don't customize anything, but if you want to customize it, you want to customize roles or users. You're not going to touch anything else, and I'm going to explain how to do that. Inside the code, if I go to the user identity DbContext file, you will see that it is inheriting from identity DbContext. If I go to models, you will see that I have one custom identity user. All users in the identity DbContext are stored in an entity of type identity user. All roles will be stored in an entity of type identity role. If you want to extend and add a field to any of the tables that you have predefined in identity DbContext, you just need to extend them. Here I have custom identity user. I'm just adding a custom field to it, as meaningless as that. And let's go back to the code, and here I will just pass the type of the user that I want to use, which is custom identity user here. Can I pass other things? Yes, I can pass T roles as well, and I can pass T role, TK, T claims, T user role. As you can see, I can extend all the types. Let's stick to the identity user and see how it works. Let me save it and go to the console. Let's rebuild everything, see if it can rebuild everything. Go back to the SQL Server, go to the ASP.NET users, open columns. I don't have it. Let's refresh on it. As you can see, custom field is added here for me. Then if you want to add a field to one of the tables that you have here, change the behavior. By behavior, I mean change the structure of it. Just extend the base type and pass the type to the DbContext, identity DbContext, and it will do the magic for you. The next question you might have is it possible to use this identity DbContext to have some other tables as well, like tables for addresses, countries, employees, and things like that? Yes, it is possible, but we highly recommend not to do that. Have one database isolated just for identity related things and use it just for that purpose. Just for the sake of demo, I have one employee class which has employee ID, first name and last name, and here inside user identity context I'm just going to add public dbset employee, and I'm going to call it employee as well. When I save it, go to the console and try to rebuild it. When I go back to my SQL server again and on the tables, just refresh it, I will see that I have this employee table as well. Remember it, I'm repeating it. It is not a good practice to use a table, a different table inside the identity database that you created. Usually we have our identity database separated and isolated somewhere, because the way that we are treating other tables is that it is a DB set, we can add something to it, we can delete something from that. But for identity table, for identity database, for identity related tables, we don't add, delete, or read anything directly from them. We have some user manager class or maybe role manager class for us to do everything related to the role and user easily. Let's go back to the code and remove everything here, and let's save it. The reason that I can see the changes in my database really fast is inside my service registration, I told it to remove the database, drop the database first and create a new one. And then because of that, by having any changes, if I run my console again and just refresh the database, I will see the changes here. It is the reason that I told you usually during the development, I let this line for deleting be here because I always need it. I'm mostly changing something, but do not forget to remove it afterwards. Now it is time to implement our identity related features in our services and register the services that we need to use. Let me close everything and start from the program.cs. Here is the place that you need to register your identity related things. I have one extension method inside the services just to register the identity related services. If I press F12 on it, you will see that I have one add application identity. Let me remove the comments here. I am returning service.add default identity. When you are using add default identity, it accepts the type of the user that you want to work for. As an example, I used custom user identity. If I want to really use custom user identity as the entity for my user, I need to pass it here to the default identity as well. It accepts some options. For example, the option that I have for sign-in, the option that I have for password, I set everything to false. Usually by default, it should have 6 digits, have a lowercase, uppercase, and a sign in it, but I made everything to false and required length 3. Because in this demo and in the next videos, my password will be 1, 2, 3. As simple as that. In the live project, don't do that. Make everything true. Not make everything true, but read them, read the documentation, and do not let users to use stupid passwords like 1, 2, 3. We can change some other things. For example, for logout, we can say the time span is 5 minutes, the max attempt is 5 times, and after that it is going to block the user. And is it allowed for new users or not? The characters for the username which are allowed, and as you can see, the characters are all capital letter, a small letter, and some signs. And required unique email false, which means that 2 users with a single email address can be registered here. This is the registration of the identity, ASP.NET identity, and the related services and configuration of that. We want to use roles as well. Then we need to add role to it and pass the type of the entity which is responsible for carrying the data related to the role. I'm using the default one, which is identity role, then pass it to it. And then we have add identity framework stores, which is telling the ASP.NET pipeline that what DbContext is responsible for being in contact between ASP.NET identity and identity database. We are telling it that this DbContext is responsible for getting data and setting data inside the database for us. Now that we registered everything, let's save everything again. And go to the services and then identity. I created out services here and out services. Everything here are commented. Let me uncomment them. We are going to implement a login method, a logout method, register new user, add user claim, and generate cookie authentication. These are the things that I'm going to implement. And inside the out services, if I uncomment everything, for manipulating and getting data from ASP.NET identity, you shouldn't treat it as one normal DbContext. In normal DbContext, you have a DB set, you can select on it, you can get the first one, you can to list it, you can add something to it. But here, we need to create user manager and role manager inside my service registration by adding the default identity and pass identity user. After that, you will be able to ask dependency injection to provide you with the one user manager of type identity user. And by adding role with this type, it is going to register a service for role manager of type identity role for you. If you want to use them, use dependency injection to get these two instances, you should register your identity and register your role. In this service, I'm injecting HTTP context accessor as well. HTTP context accessor is something really useful. You can get the HTTP context out of that. We need HTTP context because sign in and sign out are two methods inside the HTTP context, and we need to use them for use login and logout for cookie-based authentication. Let's save everything and go back to the pages that we had. Let's start with login page that we had. In the login page, we just need to inject the out service that we created inside the application service. And it is obvious that here in this project, we have a dependency to our service project as well. Okay, I forgot to mention it, but it is obvious. And previously, in the previous video, we just checked everything here. We just checked if user equal admin and if password equal 123. But here we changed it. We have a login method which checks if the user can log in or not. And here we ask to generate the cookie for the cookie authentication process. We are passing the username to it, then redirect it to the index. And if it cannot log in, if the username and password are not correct, it is going to just return the page, which means redirect to the login page again. Fine. And in the logout, we have exactly the same mechanism. We are injecting the out services, and inside the out services, we are using logout. But let's check what is the behavior that I have inside login, logout, and generate cookie authentication. In login, we are just sending the credential user, which is a model that we had for username and password. We are using the user manager to find a user by name. It doesn't have find user by username. It has just find user by name, and name is the username. It has find user by email as well, but because I told it that I don't want to have unique email, I'm going to find user by name. If I can find it, if the user is not null, I'm going to check the password. and asking it user manager.check password async. Behind the scene, when I'm adding a user, it is going to hash my password. And the time that I'm going to compare the password that user entered in the login page with the stored password that I have inside the database, it is going to hash it again and compare the hash with each other. The reason that I told you it provides us with so many functionalities is that if you wanted to implement the hashing mechanism for storing the password, comparing it, it would be a hassle. For logout, we are using the HTTP context, which is from type HTTP context accessor, and then HTTP context inside that, and sign out. And we need to specify the name of the authentication mechanism, authentication module that we have that we want to sign out. And the next thing that we wanted to check was how this generate cookie works. It is exactly the code that we had inside the login method in the page. We are getting the claims. I am going to explain it later. We are getting the claims first using this method, and then create the claim identity. After that, we are going to create the claim principals and tell it that this is my authentication scheme and this accept these principles, and done. Nothing else. Let's see how it works. Let's go to the browser. As you can see here, I can log in. If I click on login and type admin 123, it tries to log in, but because I don't have any data inside my database, it can do nothing. It is time to implement the real seeding data. If I go back to the service registration and open this seed data async, now I can uncomment these two. I created a scope, and I will ask my dependency injection to give me one instance of user manager and role manager. I'm going to call it user manager and role manager. I need them to insert data inside the database. Let me uncomment everything here and explain the lines one by one. I have 3 roles: admin role, contributor role, and user role. And I'm generating them out of my identity role. When you create an identity role entity or object, it will ask you for the name of the role. In the previous session, I told you that it is better to type safe everything. Instead of writing admin here, because of the misspelling, I created type safe class, and inside that role class, and we have one constant for the name that I want, which is admin here, as you can see. I did exactly the same thing for contributors and users as well. Then I will use the role manager to just create async. On role manager, when you say create async, it is going to create a role for you and pass the role object to it. Now it is time to create the user entities. The user entities are from type identity user. Username is admin@test.com. I have another username for contributor because typing it is a bit hard and I want to type everything as fast as possible. It is cont. Cont is contributor. It's an abbreviation. And a user. I have 3 users as well: admin user, contributor user, and user. And I'm using user manager here. And create async means creating a user here. I need to pass a user identity and a password. Password for all the users that I have in this project is 123. The reason that I can use 123 is that inside the configuration, I told it that the security checks on the password should be disabled. And then it is the time that add a claim to the user. We can add a claim to user, and that claim will be accessible for just that single user, or we can add a claim to a role, and each user which is a part of that role can get this claim. In some role-based authentication systems, if you check Microsoft Azure and check RBAC system that it has for role-based authentication, we have some roles like site admin, like contributor, and there are some permissions assigned to the role. You can assign roles separately to a user as well. Combining the permissions which are assigned to the role and to the user and the relation between different roles and user will create the final permission list for the user, and after that Azure or some other systems are checking the permissions. I'm going to show you how to add a claim to a user. I'm using user manager. To add a claim, we need to pass the user, not the username, the user entity, and then a claim. For example, here, admin claim user for the admin user. And because it is a claim on top of a user, I have underscore user at the end of that, contributor claim underscore user for contributor user, and user claim underscore user for the user. I am adding roles to users or users to roles. I'm not sure. I'm assigning them together. I need to use the user manager and add to role async. I need to specify the username and then the type or the name of the role. I'm assigning admin user to the admin group, contributor to the contributor group, and user to the user group. Sorry, I mean user role, contributor role. And here, using the role manager, I can add some claims to my roles as well. Let's save it and see how it works. I have 3 files here in the solution level for the role claim, role user, and user claims. Let's check them. Here for the role claims, we can check what are the claims for my role. If I open it, the role name is admin, the claim type is admin claim underscore role, and the value is value1. And let's check it for the user. For the user, it is the relationship between the users and roles, contributor user in contributor role, user in user role, and admin in admin role. And for user claims, you will see that admin claim for user. And we have these values as well. Now that we have everything inside the database, let's go back to the UI and check everything. Here, if I log in using admin user and 123, it says welcome admin. Let me log out. If I log in again using contributor user and 123, it will says welcome cont, and for the user it will be the same. Let me log in with admin and 123 and click on login. I have 2 more functionalities here. One of them is managing claims. If I click on that, you will see that all the claims that I have registered for this user and for the role which is assigned to this user are listed here. One of them is the name, which is admin. The admin claim user, which is a claim assigned to the user itself, is listed here. We have a role, which is admin again. And we have admin claim role here registered, which is a claim that we added to the role admin. And I just wrote a code here for adding some claims to the user, like as an example, test 123. If I add it, it says that there is an error here. Let me check what is wrong. Let me go back to the code. Let me go to the page. And in the claim, okay, it was commented. Let me uncomment everything here for claim management. And for the user management, for adding user, let me uncomment it because I'm going to explain it to you. How can we do that and save everything? After that, it will be ready to use. Let's log in with admin again and 123. If I log in and go to the claim manager management and type test and 123 and add it, I can see that nothing happens. If I check in my console, it added something for me, but How can I see that? We are reading the claims from http://context.user.claims, and we are setting that when we log in to the system and generate the cookie, we are not always in all requests check the database. We generate the cookie on login, and after that, if you add the claim, remove a claim, it won't be applied on the user until the user logged in and logged out. Then let's log out and log in again, admin and 123. If I go to the claim management, you can see that we have a test with value 123. Let's go back to the code and see how we implemented this functionality. Inside the user claim, we are just using a list of claims and a user claim. User claim, if I check it, it has just one string for type and one string for value. And I'm just adding the auth services. In auth services, I have a method for add user claim. We are passing the name of the user and the object that we created for claim with the type and with the value. I explained it in the previous video. If you haven't seen that, I highly recommend to watch it. We have a claim. Claim is nothing. It's just a pair of key and value, and both of them are a string. The first one, the first value is a key, which is the type of the claim. We have some specific types which have some meanings for us, like user and role, that we can manipulate it. And the value is the value. By nature, by definition, claim doesn't have any meaning. You need to apply something, you need to implement something to use the claims and give it a meaning. Let me go here. As you might know, for adding a claim, we need to get the user. We have the user name, find the user by name. If the user is not null, we are going to use user manager.addClaimAsync and pass the user identity object that we have and the claim. And everything will be fine after that. And let's see how can we add a user. If I just click on new user, it is asking me an email. It is not an email. Our username can be anything. I'm calling it Foad, my name, and password 123, and register. Let's log out and try to log in using Foad 123. Yes, it works. Creating user is as simple as that. How? Inside the code, let me show it to you. I have one. If I can find it, add user, I'm injecting the auth services. I'm using the auth service that's register user. Inside the register user, I'm just creating one identity user and use the user manager that create async to create everything for me. The only thing that remains is just one thing, and this get claim method. When we want to get claims related to one user, we need to get user claim and role claim. And because we assigned a role to the user, the name of the role is a claim as well. Can you remember that inside? Let me show it to you. If I log in using admin with this password, and when I go to the manage claims, and it has a role which is admin, but if I go to the database, not database, I guess, inside the user claim, when I run it, admin user doesn't have a claim with the name role. How is it possible? Because we are getting the user in get claims, and then we are creating a list of claims. First thing that we need is to generate a claim with the name using username. And then we have a list of claims. We are going to add a range, and we read this range from user management that get claims async and pass the user identity object to that. It is going to read all the claims related to this user inside the database. Then I'm going to get the role which is assigned to this user, and for each role I am going to add the role as a claim with the type role to the list of the claims that I am generating. It is really important. the roles that you assign to a user should be inserted inside the claims as well. And then for each role, I'm using role manager, find role by name, get the role identity object, and get all the claims for that role identity object and add it to claim. And this is the way that we are getting all the claims related to one user directly or indirectly from the database. It was all the content that I prepared for you today. In the next video, I'm going to talk about JWT and how to have one web API project just to generate a JSON web token and another web application user and web API user to use it and authenticate using that token. If you like this video, do not forget to hit the like button and subscribe to my channel. And please hit the bell. By hitting the bell, the next time that I'm uploading a video, you will be notified. If you think that this content might be useful for your friends or your colleagues, please introduce my channel to them and ask them to watch it and subscribe to my channel. Keep coding and keep enjoying your life as a developer.